Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and I'm a sci-fi guy. I don't really read a lot of horror, but it is October, so I decided to pick up some books, share a bit of a book haul that is in a subgenre that is horror adjacent. I have 5 dystopian books for your TBR. And as a bit of a bonus, I have a special edition of a classic dystopian book that I want to share with you guys, and at the end of the video, I'll be spinning the quantum wheel in order to find out what sci-fi books my patrons have picked for me in the month of October. So let's get into these dystopian books, starting with On the Beach by Nevil Shute. After nuclear war has destroyed most of the globe, the few remaining survivors in southern Australia await the radioactive cloud, bringing certain death to everyone in its path. When a faint Morse code signal is picked up, Captain Towers must lead his submarine crew on a bleak tour of the ruined world in a desperate search for signs of life. I live in the US now, but as someone that grew up in Australia, I'm looking forward to reading this one because I haven't read a lot of science fiction books that are set in Australia, so that should be fun. Nuclear war, less fun, obviously, but not a bad backdrop for a dystopian novel. I haven't read anything by Nevil Shute before, but I have heard of his novel A Town Called Alice, which is also set in Australia, but that one's not science fiction, so a little less interested in reading that one. On the Beach is a post-apocalyptic novel, which often goes hand in hand with the dystopian subgenre. I feel like all post-apocalyptic books are dystopian, but not all dystopian books are post-apocalyptic. It's kind of a square and rectangle type thing. This is supposed to be more of a soft science fiction novel that focuses less on the scientific ramifications of nuclear war and more so on how it affects society and individual people, which I think is something that can be done well if the author is a strong thematic and character writer. But apparently Isaac Asimov wasn't the biggest fan of this book, as he remarked, "Surely to the science fiction fan, as opposed to the general public, this must seem very milk and watery. So there's nuclear war to start the story with. And what else is new? There can be nothing duller than tomorrow's headlines in science fiction." So let me know if you've read On the Beach and if you think I'll enjoy it more than Asimov. Up next, Ice by Anna Kavan. In a frozen apocalyptic landscape, destruction abounds and secretive governments vie for control. And in this surreal world, an unnamed narrator embarks on a hallucinatory quest for a strange and elusive girl with silver hair. He crosses icy seas and frozen plains to free her from the grips of a tyrant known only as the Warden and save her before the ice closes all around. I haven't read anything from Anna Kavan before, and Ice is her most well-known work, which was actually published just 1 year before she unfortunately passed away. I've heard Ice described as surreal and dreamlike, which are qualities that sometimes I connect to more than others. I like dream sequences sometimes, but if they go on for too long, that can start to frustrate me just a little bit. But this book is only around 200 pages, so I don't anticipate that being too much of a problem. This book supposedly tackles some heavy themes to do with violence, addiction, and agency, so it might be the type of book that you need to be in the right mood in order to pick up, but it does sound like it could potentially be a very powerful read. Apparently, author Brian Aldiss was a supporter of the novel and encouraged the publisher Doubleday to release an edition of the book after Anna Kavan passed away, and I recently read his book Nonstop and really liked it, so I'm hoping I enjoy this book Ice just as much. Next up, we have High Rise by J.G. Ballard. When a class war erupts inside a luxurious apartment block, modern elevators become violent battlegrounds, and cocktail parties degenerate into marauding attacks on enemy floors. In this visionary tale, human society slips into violent reverse, as once peaceful residents, driven by primal urges, recreate a world ruled by the laws of the jungle. I tend to be intrigued by stories that take place in a single location. I like the atmosphere that it creates and how the confinement generates this narrative pressure that hopefully erupts in exciting and unexpected ways. It's interesting to have a situation in which social norms and pretenses are stripped away and true human natures are revealed. It seems to have a bit of a Lord of the Flies type aspect to it, but with adults in luxury apartments, which sounds like a bit of a fun combination. High Rise was adapted into a film in 2015, which I haven't seen, but it has a pretty stacked cast, so let me know if you've seen it and if you enjoyed it, and if I like the book, I might have to give that a watch as well. So next up, I wanted to share a special edition that I recently received from SP Books that is a dystopian classic and one of my favorites, 1984 by George Orwell. The unique thing that SP Books does is publish manuscripts of classic works. They make copies of the author's original manuscripts so you can read the book in their handwriting and see the notes and edits that they made along the way. This wouldn't be how I would recommend reading a book for the first time, but if you love a book and have read it multiple times and would like to experience insights into the creation of that work, it's a pretty cool way to do that. It's also just a beautiful book to have displayed on the shelf. If you're a deluxe book collector, the quality of these books is extremely high, and they are quite large at 10 by 14 inches, which might be helpful to know when planning where you'd like to display them. The design is quite simple and understated, but I think it fits the classic aesthetic. In the 1984 edition, the manuscript was obtained from multiple sources and includes both handwritten and typed pages, and it's pretty cool to read and see the notes and edits that Orwell wrote. I should point out that this particular book isn't complete. It features about half of the original 1984 manuscripts, but other releases from SP Books do contain complete manuscripts. Overall, I think this is a niche product, but if there's a classic book that you're a fan of, I think this is a unique way to gain a new perspective on that book, and it's going to look great on the shelf. They focus more on classics, but there are 3 releases that I think sci-fi fans might be particularly interested in, including 1984, Frankenstein, and At the Mountains of Madness. Each edition is limited to 1,000 copies, and they are set at a deluxe price point, but if you're an avid book collector, then you can check out the link to those in the description. And for our next book we have The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Environmental disasters and declining birth rates have led to a second civil war. The result is the rise of a totalitarian regime that enslaves the few remaining fertile women. Offred is a handmaid, bound to produce children for the commander. Deprived of her husband, her child, her freedom, and even her own name, Offred clings to her memories and her will to survive. The Handmaid's Tale has been on my TBR for too long, so I'm looking forward to finally reading this one. I have read Oryx and Crake by Atwood, which didn't have the most satisfying plot development, but I did find Atwood to be a powerful writer. Oryx and Crake was a pretty heavy read, and I'm expecting The Handmaid's Tale to be no different as it explores power dynamics, government, religion, gender, and environmental issues. This book won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, was nominated for the Nebula Award, and is one of the highest selling dystopian novels over the last 50 years. It was also adapted into a series on Hulu, and its 6th and final season is set to come out next year. I haven't watched the show, but if I enjoy the book, this might be another one that I need to pick up. And lastly, Vurt by Jeff Noon. Scribble and his gang, the Stash Riders, haunt the streets of an alternate Manchester, chasing the immersive highs that come from Vurt feathers. Place a feather in your mouth and it takes you to the Vurt, another place, a trip, a shared reality of all our dreams and mythologies. But as the game cat says, be careful, be very careful. This ride is not for the weak. Vurt combines the cyberpunk and dystopian genres, and I've heard it described as Neuromancer meets A Clockwork Orange, which, to me, is a pretty strong pitch. I haven't read anything by Noon before, but I have had a couple of people recommend to me his book The Body Library, which is supposed to be a pretty cool sci-fi detective novel. This is another book that's supposed to be a little trippy, a little surreal, and I think that ambitious style of writing is high risk, high reward. It's a little bit like when those Olympic divers do the highest difficulty dives. It has the highest potential for them to flop, but also it's the most rewarding if they nail it. So there you go, those are 5 dystopian novels for the TBR. Let me know your thoughts on those and if you're interested in picking any of them up. And if you're interested in finding out what my patrons have picked for me to read in the month of October, let's head over to the Quantum Wheel. Welcome to the Quantum Wheel Spooky Edition, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner, and are of the dark, bleak, or eerie variety. So let's find... Wait, what just happened? Oh, I am not a fan of this. Okay, we're back. That was ominous. Anyway, let's find out what spooky sci-fi book I'll be reading this October. Spin. Spooky Quantum Wheel spin. What is it going to land on? Let's find out. Could be Sphere. Could be The Island of Dr. Moreau. Sphere is the winner, Michael Crichton. So there you go. I don't know too much about this book other than I believe it's a mystery. Maybe there's something down deep under the water. So a little bit of underwater horror-esque vibes. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you've read this one. I've only read Jurassic Park so far by Michael Crichton, but I'm looking forward to checking out Sphere. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider checking out the perks of becoming a Patreon member, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs, like Nima, a New Eden, Half Ogre, Zakoway, and the Creepy Colin. And you can find more sci-fi content over here.